Hi students, I hope you're having a great week. Um, so this week we are entering the medieval portion of our ancient medieval class, and technically speaking, I guess Augustine, you could call him late Christianity uh, and antiquity. He kind of is setting the stage for the medieval era. Um, he's definitely on the precipice of it. Um, and I hope that you enjoy learning about him. Full disclosure, he is one of my areas of specialty that I publish on. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about book one. And aside from that, I'm also going to go through just some practical things with you about this week. So this week is your oral exam, which counts as your midterm. And basically what I want it to be is a conversation around the 3 questions that you've given me. Now, we're kind of going to use those questions as a springboard, and I'll ask them to you, and then I want you to engage with me based on how you prepared for those questions. I might ask you some follow-up questions, but I promise not to ask anything too hard. It's more colloquial, but I do want you to take it seriously. It's an opportunity for you to be able to try to understand this material in another way, and an opportunity for us to get to know each other a little better. So on the one hand, it's low pressure. On the other hand, it's not the kind of thing you blow off. So just be mindful of when you signed up. We're going to use Skype for Business because that's what the school uses. And in advance, I'll contact you and then we can set up the technology. If it's the case that Skype for Business doesn't work, then what we're going to do is just talk on the phone. Okay? So that's that. There's a brief chance, or a minor chance, that I might have to move around one of the exams. I'd move it around in a way that would be beneficial to you, because my grandfather is probably going to pass this week. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm just letting you know. So be prepared to go on the day you're supposed to go, and understand that it could be possible that I might have to write you and ask for it to be later at a time that works for you. But I don't think that will happen. So the City of God. What is happening in the City of God? I have to warn you that it is an odd text. So I say that about everything we've read. Plato, he writes dialogues. Aristotle, it's like we have his lecture notes and we've got to fill out some blanks. Augustine, if you just read him kind of casually, it can seem like it's just a bunch of word vomit. That he's just rambling and rambling and rambling, going on and on and on, and then he remembers this thing and he remembers that thing and whatever. Okay. I discourage you from thinking of it that way, because Augustine's a pleasure to read. Read him like a conversation with someone who talks a lot to you. And you'll notice different things. You'll notice that he kind of writes like an author. And what I mean by that is, you know how you have a novelist and you can pick up different things from their word choices, or they make cutting remarks or kind of amp up the emotion in a particular scene, either of distress or anger or joy or humor. Augustine is a master rhetorician. That was what he was before he became a bishop. He was skilled in the art of rhetoric, very good at it. Kind of rose to the top on skill alone. And he never loses that. But he's also a really clear thinker. And I think people can get thrown off and just think that he's not making sense when he is. The way that when you read a literary work and you're trying to figure out, why did the author put this chapter here? What is the structure of this, plot decision supposed to tell me about the theme of the book? Those are the kinds of things it's good to ask about the City of God. And you will come across a lot of references that might not make sense to you. Like, he may reference a certain thinker or poem or historical figure that you might not know who they are. You might, but you might not. And that's okay. Just look it up if you're confused. A lot of times the edition you have will have good footnotes as well. And just don't get stressed out about how long it is. When you're reading Augustine for me this time, I want you to read it all, kind of immerse yourself in it, and then go back and focus on sections that capture your mind. So with all of that being said, now let's talk a little bit about why Augustine wrote the City of God. So Augustine wrote the City of God at a moment of great, great change. I don't know that there's really an analog for it for us now. I mean, it may be seeing the Twin Towers fall and then entering into the wars that we did in the Middle East might sort of be like that, but not really. It's even more dramatic than that. Rome falls to a group of kind of seemingly disorganized and uncivilized pagans, and the Romans at this point had conquered a good amount of the world. Not only had they conquered it, but they had devised incredible innovations in politics, in art, in architecture, in engineering, in warfare, all of that. And so what you're seeing is this very, very, very advanced civilization falling to a more primitive one. The world is in shock. Not just because of the level of sophistication of Rome, but also because of the fact that Rome rules so much. And if Rome is going to fall, so many territories, so many people are going to be vulnerable. When this time of great change is occurring, Augustine is a bishop of Hippo, which is in North Africa. And he had started out as an ambitious young man of sort of a middling noble family. And his mother and father are very eager that through his studies he will rise to some sort of high position in the imperial court. His life doesn't quite turn out that way. He ends up, it's a really interesting biography and we should talk about it sometime. He ends up becoming a Christian. His mother was a Christian, but he becomes one after, dabbling in several other things, including Neoplatonism, including Manichaeism, including hedonism. And so he is brilliant, but this brilliance is at service of the church. And he is involved in everything because of that. I mean, it's not like it is now where there's such a strict separation between church and state. He, as a bishop, people are writing to him from everywhere, asking him for political advice, asking him for social advice, asking him for advice about marriages, who should marry who, asking him for advice about wars and laws. And so he is in the middle, so to speak, of a really transformative time. And when Rome falls, he has his pulse on the fact that Rome has fallen, and now what that means is that we have to ask, what does human power even mean? What can we accomplish? What is the greatest thing that we can do? If the greatest thing we've done, which seems to be the civilization of Rome, can be brought to its knees so easily, why, in the face of all of that seeming virtue, is this kind of suffering allowed? Which represents, it's just another formulation of this age-old question, why do we suffer, right? If the world was made by a good God, why do we suffer? Why do we live an experience of contingency and decay? Why are good people punished along with bad people? Why do bad people flourish sometimes? These are age-old questions, and they're being kind of crystallized in this experience of the fall of Rome. And that's definitely the taste you get from book one. Now, you'll notice that it's addressed to someone named Marcellinus, and Marcellinus was a government official who is writing for advice, and what Augustine is trying to do, because remember, all of this is very new for people who are Christians, it's trying to get him to think about political rule in a way that a Christian should. That's a very complex question, because there's a lot of different ways one could answer it. And it's interesting to me that it's addressed to Marcellinus, because Marcellinus eventually dies. He's executed by the state because he's falsely accused of doing something. And as you keep reading the City of God, you'll understand why that's so fitting. A lot of the City of God is about, in the midst of politics, which has so much to do with uncertainty and trying to predict what will happen, and trying to make things that will last, and trying to help the right people be in the right positions, and trying to become the kind of person who can rule well, trying to know what it is your political opponent thinks, trying to know when to compromise, trying to know when not to. All of that, right, is kind of shrouded in mystery. And so Marcellinus is somebody who becomes involved in politics in this realm shrouded with mystery and uncertainty, and he ends up losing his life. But Augustine had seen him and encouraged him to be involved in politics as a source of the common good. Okay, and so I think it's really fitting that Marcellinus is the person this is dedicated to, because he shows sort of the dangers and also the purpose or virtues behind political life. So we've talked about the kind of context for what Augustine is doing. So now let's focus in a little bit more on what this means for your study. I'm going to try to guide you through it. This is my daughter. She says hi. So Augustine is trying to basically, in a sense, justify the ways of God, to show that even though there's a suffering and contingency, there still is a God who is in control, and there's still a God who is providential. And not just providential, but who loves us. Because the sort of suffering that is seen in the fall of Rome is kind of like a sign that no matter how much humans accomplish, it can always be brought down, right? And the fear is, right, that there's no real security in even our best attempts. So where does security come from?
Right, Mom?
And even more than that, what if there isn't a God? What if things are like this because there isn't a God that we can trust at all? There isn't even one, right? Or what if there is one and he's just not trustworthy? This is what Augustine is trying to argue against. He's trying to explain how there could be a God who loves us and is in control, and how all of these things could happen. Basically, what the purpose of all of these things are. And so a couple of themes emerge in the very first book. One theme that you should focus on is humility. Okay, from the very first chapter of book 1, Augustine makes fun of the Romans because they love to be praised for being humble. And he says, who loves to be praised for being humble? That's like ridiculous. And so another thing you'll see is that because they lack humility, they're prideful, and their pride leads to a lot of dysfunction, tons of dysfunction. And what I'd suggest is that this sort of desire to excel as a human, right, is really a desire to make yourself secure. But it's almost a prideful desire because it's wanting to be the one in control, wanting to be on top of everything, wanting to be the hero, right? But not for the sake of others, for the sake of yourself and your own anxiety. And you'll see pretty quickly how that happens. The second theme that you want to pay attention to is the theme of mercy, okay? And you see this in the description of the Christians who offer sanctuary during the fall. And you see this even in the description of Romulus, which is really weird. And you'll start to see that the proper response to contingency and decay is mercy. Is a type of self-gift, like the person who extends welcome in a time of trouble, like Romulus being willing to take convicts to form his city. Another thing that you're going to see is the outlining of the two cities, the city of God, the city of man. Pay careful attention to how those cities are constructed. It is wrong to think that they are not both in the mix on earth, and it's also wrong to think that the city of God is identical to the church, right? Or that someone who's in the church is automatically in the city of God. Someone who's not in the church is automatically not. That's a mistake. And also think about what it means for the city of God and city of man to be present in some form on earth, right? Where else are they present? How else are they present? Those are going to be really important thoughts. When we move on into book 2 to 4, what you're going to see is basically a continuation of the fourth theme. The fourth theme is about retelling the story of Rome. Who are the real heroes of Rome? What are the real motivations of Rome? Why did the Romans do things the way they did? And in what ways are these connected to the problem of pride? And what you start to see is that pride actually, in addition to the sort of contingency and suffering that's just a part of life, pride brings all this extra contingency, all this extra suffering. And pride is behind the misidentification of certain heroes, right? Like Lucretia, who, it's not just bad that Lucretia is praised because she's not actually doing something good, according to Augustine. It's bad because if you praise Lucretia, what's going to happen is people will follow her example. And the example of Lucretia is a harsh one because she takes her own life after being traumatized. You'll see when there's discussions of civil religion and Varro, again, this problem emerges. The pride of Varro, who says, well, I know that these gods that the Romans are talking about aren't real, but I'm going to let the common people believe in them. Okay, the pride of Varro, again, causes all of these problems because the gods are bad. They do bad things and they teach people to do bad things. And again, it's not merciful because Varro knows the truth. He doesn't think other people can handle the truth. And the consequence of that is that A, people are left in the dark, and B, they suffer because they are left in the dark. Okay, so Varro, again, is not merciful, and he's not merciful because he's proud. So what you're going to see is a kind of questioning, just a real constant questioning of all of the structures, all of the motives, all of the loves of Rome, what they love. Okay, and read book 1 closely. It kind of lays everything else out. I think the analysis of Lucretia and Cato and Regulus occurring like this, really tight, is extremely important. But as you keep reading, just kind of be trying to figure out what is the hermeneutic here. What are we trying to understand about Rome? What is the picture of Rome that Augustine is bringing me? And then what does that retelling tell me about life, especially political life?